town gathering reception after the distinguished talk, and we used this for poster session at lunch break, and I thought it worked out great. Afterwards, after the distinguished lecture, we will also have Gather Town again for the reception, and this is the setup. So there's a link for that, and if you go that, it's pretty easy to use. Please, I hope you participate. And then, and now I'm going to pass the mic to Linda to introduce our distinguished speaker.
Thanks, Tevfik. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Valerie Taylor, who I've known for quite a while, beginning with serving with her on, it seems like, many NSF advisory boards. She has really done a tremendous amount of work for the community. Valerie is the director of the Mathematics and Computer Science Division and Argonne Distinguished Fellow at Argonne National Laboratory. She has held multiple leadership roles at Texas A&M University prior to joining Argonne. In particular, she served as a Senior Associate Dean of Academic Affairs in the College of Engineering, a Regents Professor, and the Royce E. Weisenbacher Professor in the Department of Computer Science and Engineering. Before she was at Texas A&M, Valerie was a faculty member in Northwestern University's Electrical Engineering and Computer Science Department for 11 years. She has authored more than 100 papers on high-performance computing. And she's a fellow of the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers, IEEE, and of the ACM. She has received numerous awards for distinguished research and leadership. Valerie Taylor is the CEO and president of the Center for Minorities and People with Disabilities in IT. And I love this acronym, COMMAND IT, for which the vision is to contribute to the national need for an effective workforce in computing and IT through synergistic activities related to African Americans, Latinx, Native Americans, and people with disabilities. Valerie will be speaking about increasing diversity in computing. Take it away, Valerie.
Thank you so much, Linda. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you very much for the invitation to present. So, and let me just bring up my slides. Okay. 1 minute, start my share. Okay, so is it good? Everybody can, okay.
Yes, looks great.
Okay, thank you. Then I'll go ahead and start. So it's a wonderful pleasure to be here. And first, I also want to congratulate the teams, and that's the first, second, third place teams, but all the teams that participated in the project, the capstone project session. So just to congratulate the teams. And so today I'm going to talk about increasing diversity. And the focus is in computing because that's where I have the experience. And I'm going to talk about lessons learned, and it's lessons learned to date because it's recognized that I'm still learning, but I'm happy to share what I've learned thus far. So first, whenever I talk about diversity, I always like to present a case for diversity. And that is, it's beyond the feel good. So I want to present the case to talk about, from an industry perspective, a case for diversity. And that is, McKinsey did a report, and it came out in May 2020, was the last report, where they looked at about 1,000 companies in about 15 countries. And they looked at gender diversity as well as ethnic diversity. When they looked at gender diversity in terms of the top quartile of the companies with respect to gender diversity, for 2019, they found 25% of the companies were in that top quartile, where it was, they experienced above average profitability. Okay, and that's 25% more likely to experience above average profitability. In 2017, it was 21%, 2014, it was 15%. So we can see over time, in terms of the likelihood of experiencing more above average profitability is increasing with gender diversity. With ethnic diversity, for that top quartile, they were 36% more likely to experience above average profitability. And so that's really important in terms of companies, where you want to look at diversity in terms of the work that you're doing, the products that you're delivering. So I also want to present a case looking at it from a faculty perspective. And that's where a colleague, we went to grad school together at Berkeley, Andrew Aline, who is a professor, the Ralph and Catherine Fisher Professor of Mechanical and Systems Engineering at UIUC. And so he actually looked at his research group and did a detailed study of his group and found prior to 2003, he had less than 10% women. After 2003, he had more of around 33 to 50% women. He did comparisons before and after, and he found when he increased the diversity of his graduate students, there was an increase in the collaborative nature and culture of his research group, in which he looked at how much he was collaborating with other faculty within the department and also outside of the department. He also found a 50% increase in productivity in terms of, he looked at the publications as well as a higher citation count. He also found it was better internal, external communication of ideas, and it was a better sense of community and cohesiveness. So I present the data here just to talk about a case for diversity from the industry perspective, as well as looking at it from the faculty perspective. So now we have those cases, and I just want to frame a little bit more, and that is to say, where are we, and this is again with computer science, in terms of the undergraduate, the BS, the baccalaureate graduates, and where are we in terms of that diversity? And so this is data based upon NSF that was reported in the Washington Post, that really looks at it in terms of Black, Hispanic. The other includes Native American and also international, Asian and white. And we can see that there's a lot to be done. For Black, it's about the same. Hispanic is some increase, which is good. To 6 to 11, great. Other, and that's partly dependent upon the counting of that category, also an increase with Asian. And then we see, in terms of white, still about 55%. So there's still much to be done in terms of higher education and what we're doing with respect to diversity, because we see it's needed in industry. We also see the importance in terms of faculty with respect to our graduate student populations. So I want to spend the next probably about 40 minutes talking about lessons learned from 4 programs. Okay. And the 4 programs, one is called the LEAP Alliance, and it's, and I'm going to give more details as we get further along. The second one is the academic careers workshops, looking at the academic ladder. The LEAP Alliance is looking at increasing diversity of the PhD students so as to increase the diversity in terms of the faculty in computer science. Then we also have the Tapia Conferences, and those have been going on since 2001, and the University Award. So these are all 4 programs that I'm very familiar with through Commanded, and I want to give you my lessons learned. And just to give a little bit more framing, in terms of the LEAP Alliance, we're looking at PhD students. With respect to the academic careers workshops, we're looking at senior PhD students, postdocs, assistant, as well as associate professors. When we look at the Tapia conferences, we're looking at student communities and role models. And then when we look at also the University Award, it's looking at undergraduate student retention. And so all of these components are important, where you're looking at undergraduate students, graduate students, faculty, you're looking at where your students are going, you're looking at the academic ladder. And the one part that's really important, and that's institutional change. So that's what I want to advocate for throughout the talk, is about institutional change. And it becomes so important because when you have institutional change, it's sustainable. It goes beyond individuals and it goes to the behavior, the value, the culture of that institution. So next, I also want this to be a bit interactive. And that is, let's conduct a little poll. And I think, thank you. So for institutional change, is culture important? Yes, no, or maybe? Thank you. Okay, so everybody's with me about the importance of culture. And so, okay. Let's see, okay, do I? Oh. Okay, and were the results shared? I'm just making certain, okay. 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 Just trying to, okay. So when we talk about institutional change, and that is, I just want to, being an academic, you want to give some references too. And that is Adriana Kazar and Peter Eckel. So Adriana is now at USC and does a lot in terms of institutional change. And so they, in 2002, they conducted a study of looking at about 6 institutions and identifying, and they were very different institutions, and identifying what were the strategies that worked in terms of affecting change. And what they found was reading institutional culture was really important in terms of a match with strategies to actually bring about the effective change. So when we go, and let's just delve a little deeper, so that when we go to culture, what we're looking at has to do with behaviors. We're looking at shared values. We're looking at assumptions and beliefs and all of the factors in terms of being a member of an organization. So that culture becomes so important, but it's recognized too, the culture is local. So it's not where we can talk about something that works at one institution, we can just transfer it exactly at another institution. Culture becomes important. So now I want to take the opportunity to go into some detail about those 4 programs. And of those 4 programs, one program that really stands out in terms of institutional change is the LEAP Alliance. And that's looking at leadership in the professoriate, or diversifying leadership in the professoriate. And so this was formerly called the FLIP Alliance, but we became aware that the term FLIP was negative in terms of Filipinos. And so we changed the name to LEAP. So that's why I have formerly as FLIP. And now we're LEAP, leaping forward. But this was actually funded as an NSF Includes project, a demonstration project. And it was really good because as part of the Includes project, it's based upon collective impact. And this is by Kenya and Kramer. For collective impact, you're looking at 5 components: a common agenda, a shared measurement system, mutually reinforcing activities, continuous communication, and a backbone support organization. And usually you want that backbone support organization to be different than the organizations involved, so that way they're providing that support and not trying to do dual roles. So this all sounds great. And I'm gonna go into a little more detail about the common agenda and also mutually reinforcing activities. So let's go first into the LEAP Alliance. And that was, just to give a little more background, a group of us, when we looked at the LEAP Alliance, we asked the question, what is the best strategy if you want to look at diversifying the faculty in computing? And so a person, Jeff Wong at Brown University, conducted a study where he looked at the doctoral degrees of the computer science faculty at the top 55 research institutions. And the interesting aspect about that study was that when you look at across all the institutions, 50% were from the top 10 institutions. So then that leads you to look at it to say, here we have 10 institutions that are generating over half of the faculty at 55 institutions. So what if we can work with those institutions such that we increase the diversity of their PhD graduates? That's a way to have an impact on the computer science faculty. So then let me ask you this next question. We have another poll. So if we take the union of the top 10 producers of CS faculty and the top 10 ranked CS institutions, how many institutions would we have? So I just showed you a table that talked about 50% coming from the top 10 ranked institutions, but there's a list of the top producers. Okay, the numbers are changing. So if we take that union, okay. I think it's still coming in. I'll give a few, and it's just a guess. So everybody. Okay, it seems to be stable. Okay, so we can see the top was 10, followed by 13, and then 11, 15. And the actual number is 11. And that is, we had, and I did share results, right? Okay, thank you. I can see a few heads nodding. It's very different, with the virtual. I have still adjusting, but it's actually 11 institutions. Harvard is an institution that was ranked in terms of the top 10 producers of the faculty in terms of where they received a degree, but Harvard's in the top 20 institutions. So now let's go to the next question, and that's around a common agenda, okay? So we know with the LEAP Alliance, we reached out to the 11 institutions and asked, how about we work together to address this problem? And everybody was on board. And so we said, we know what we're going to do is we're going to focus on the groups African Americans, Hispanic, Native Americans, and people with disabilities, because that's where we had the smallest numbers in terms of the CS faculty. Where, for example, if you look at the Talby report, the number of faculty from the 4 target groups is only around 4%. So everybody's on board, and it sounds good. But to really get to the heart of the common agenda, what we did was to ask everyone to provide data, and that's in an Excel file. And we said, we broke it out. African Americans, Hispanics, Native Americans, people with disabilities. And we said, give us the number of students, 1 to 2 years, 3 to 4 years, 5+ years in the PhD program. The goal behind doing this was such that everybody knew it was a problem. After they provided this data, everybody came back and said, oh my God, I didn't know it was such a bad problem. And that was having an Excel file where there were so many zeros and the different cells highlighted the issue. And that's, in terms of having that common agenda, everybody started from a common framework where everybody said, oh, I hope you're not going to share my Excel file. And it's like, no, but don't worry, you're not alone. Everybody, it looks very similar. And so everybody came to the table and said, we will engage in this even if we don't have funding from NSF. But the good part about it is we did end up getting funding from NSF, and now we have funding from Sloan. But it was an important part to develop that common agenda. So now our common agenda is to increase diversity of the future leadership in the professoriate in computing at research universities as a way to increase diversity in computing. So in terms of that common agenda, while we focused on the PhD and diversifying the PhD students, the student population, the overall goal is looking at the professoriate. So that's our common agenda. And we know this is a route to get to that common agenda in terms of increasing the diversity of the PhD student population. So with the LEAP Alliance, just to mention the mutually reinforcing activities, I'm going to spend a little bit on the influencers and the advocates. And this is part of what we've learned. So we started off learning about, we said, we're going to get the faculty involved. So let's make certain we get tenured faculty, get them involved, because we know usually policies occur with faculty in faculty meetings. What we've since learned is that our influencers are faculty and staff. It takes both. And there are very different cultures around the different institutions, and you need the combination of faculty and staff to really affect change, as well as the students. So We look at having a community, we look at cohorts, we look at professional development, and there, the academic careers workshops, those work with professional development. We also reach out to Google, Microsoft about professional development and going to their PhD summits. We have a mentoring program, and we also look at training of our advocates, and that's looking at diversity training. And we found that to be really important. Another aspect is working with partners. So we work with other partners like Access Computing, that's focused on students with disability, CASI, focused on Hispanic serving institutions or Hispanics in computing, IAAMCS, that's focused on African Americans in computer science, NSBE, the National Society of Black Engineers, as well as ACES. And so having that partnership becomes really important. And I just want to take this time in terms of some of the achievements. So this was started in 2017 with the NSF funding. And some of the achievements thus far have to do with creating a community where we told everyone we have monthly calls with the advocates. And we said, this space, we're going to utilize Chatham House rules such that whatever's discussed here stays here, like Las Vegas. What happens in Las Vegas stays in Las Vegas. What happens on the calls stays on the calls. So we wanted that community for honest discussions, bring up the issues, because it's only in bringing up the issues can you address those issues. The first year, the students from our target community, in terms of the first year students, from fall 2018 to fall 2019, we saw a 20% increase in terms of the students. From fall 2019 to fall 2020, it was flat. And a lot happened last year, and we recognize that because last year in March, when they would have the on-campus student visits, everything got canceled. We all went to online, work from home. So we're looking forward to seeing what happens this year, because now everybody, you've grown accustomed to the online, now you're having virtual visits. And so we're looking forward to this fall. We also, everybody got together and said for fall 2021 applicants, no one's considering GRE. But I want to point this out because this is where culture comes in. Some of the universities already had a policy to say, we don't even look at GRE. Some universities said it's optional. And some universities said, we're not going to do it for fall 21, and we'll have to see what happens after that. And so that's where you have some differences of what's done at the university in terms of the local culture. But collectively, we can say for fall 2021, all applicants, no GRE is required, which was important. Then we do have also community and events for the LEAP fellows, and we give them a voice as well, which is important. So just to look at lessons learned, and that is with the LEAP Alliance, we learned the importance of local advocates, faculty and staff to work with the local culture, and the importance of community among the advocates as well as among the fellows. And so now, I wanted to spend time here because I think this one is really getting that cultural change. We don't reach out to the individual students. We go through the advocates at the institution and adjust accordingly. I'm going to go through the next 3 projects kind of quickly, but it also adds to institutional change. So this one, the Academic Careers Workshop, I want to give both pictures so everybody's so serious when you look on the left, but everybody, that's their fun view on the right. So with the Academic Careers Workshop, I have a poll. So here, for graduate students, what is the one skill which they obtain very little experience while in graduate school? Okay, we're changing just a little bit. Okay. I think we're not changing too much. Okay. All right. So we can see it's proposal writing. And that's what we found. And that is in terms of the grad students, you're working as a team oftentimes in the research group. Sometimes you have an opportunity for teaching, especially if you're participating as a TA. Okay. And then networking, you have a little bit of experience with networking, but proposal writing becomes very important as a faculty member, but you get very little experience as a grad student. So in about 2005, Bryant York, who was at Portland State University at the time, and myself, we started what we called academic careers workshops. And the major component of those workshops was actually proposal writing. At that time, we started the workshops. CRA had workshops about academic careers, as well as CRAW, which is the Committee on the Status of Women, and it's now WP for widening participation. But CRA had general workshops. CRAW had workshops for women. So we targeted the communities of African American, Black, Hispanic, Latinx, Native American, Indigenous American, and people with disability. And the reason why we have that focus too is it's a focus on culture. So looking at those following communities, a major component was proposal writing. And we also wanted to make certain that we had panelists from the target groups. So just to give you an idea, a little bit of data, just to talk about pre and post, and I just highlight two, and that was knowledge about the tenure process. And I realized even when I was a faculty that some of my grad students, I think they told me I kind of scared them about the tenure process a bit. And so that was another reason for having this workshop, to dispel myths, because oftentimes you focus on research and they don't get to know you outside of research. And so I started, talking about family and, things outside of research with my grad students. But knowledge about the tenure process, and also knowledge about obtaining funding. How does that work? So those were two major components, in addition to, writing a successful research proposal. But I highlighted the areas where pre the workshop, the self-ratings of knowledge was the lowest. So if we look at, now I'm going quicker, what are some of the lessons learned? From the academic careers workshop, we learned the importance of having role models and panelists from the target communities, such that way an African American can see another African American and say, what is it really like for you? What really happens? What are you asked to do beyond your research? How is it for you? Especially also African American women, such as myself. What is it like to balance family and also research and teaching? Because I have two children and they are now 24 and 21. So, wonderful. Also, the importance of creating community among participants. And community becomes so important. So you're going to hear me talk about that a great deal, but community is really important because oftentimes the numbers at a given institution may be small. And looking at a more national level community is important. But again, back to the academic careers workshop, what we learned too was having a safe space for discussions. Again, we use the rule to say, what we discuss at the workshop stays at the workshops. We're not using this to get a list of issues. So we try to discuss that and you get different views on how to deal with issues. Oftentimes the meals serve as a good point to have more in-depth discussions. Then in terms of the proposal writing, we focused on providing participants with examples of funded proposals and unfunded proposals, such that they could see what are some mistakes that are made in terms of the unfunded proposals. And in some cases, some PIs gave us their version that was unfunded and then a version that was funded. And that was so helpful to have for the participants. So those were the 3 lessons learned with the academic careers workshops. And so now I want to turn to the University Award. And so that's where we were looking at the University Award, where the universities, and a group of us were having discussions about retention. And we said, you know, really to understand retention, you really want to go by each cohort and track students. You can't just use numbers because you don't know if students transferred into the program and maybe the students that come in are leaving, you know, so you really want to understand retention. So we started a program, and this was actually in collaboration with Microsoft, where we made it such that the award is $15,000, and universities have to provide 5 years of data that's disaggregated. So we have tabs that give, you know, for ethnicity, gender, intersectionality, and we have tabs and directions on how to count each cohort. And so we count each cohort in terms of when you enter the computer science major. We also have a tab that identifies transfer students and tracking the transfer students. So that way you can see trends in your data, what's happening with the students that enter, what happens with the students that transfer in. So in addition to the data, we asked for a description of their programs, and you know, with the description of the programs, they're also relating it back to the data. And so each year, what we do is announce the University Award is announced at the Tapia Conference. And just to give you an idea of some of their programs, so for example, Howard University received the award in September 2020, this past Tapia Conference. And 2 of their programs, one is the Google in Residence, where they have a Google engineer that's relocated to DC at Howard University, becomes part of the Howard faculty, and teach the introductory computer science courses. And work also with the faculty in terms of teaching the courses. And then there's also Howard West that's complementary. And that's where a student from Howard can spend a semester in Silicon Valley taking a course. And that course is co-taught by a Howard University faculty with a Google engineer. And so that was a way to get more connections with industry with Howard University. They also have a CS boot camp, which is for 3 of their introductory computer science courses, where it's actually, they have student-led learning where the students lead sessions twice a week. And it's actually, you know, the peer learning. And so it's students that have taken the course and done well, and they teach sessions twice a week for those 3 courses. And it's recognized too with the peer learning, which goes back to, you know, Yuri Treisman. But with the peer learning, it's recognized that students feel more comfortable asking questions of their peers because then they're not worried in terms of how they're viewed or perceived in terms of questions. And plus you find students can say, you know, I didn't understand that either. And here's what helped me to understand. So they've identified those 2 programs. University of Texas in El Paso, UTEP, which is also the home for CASI, which is the Computing Alliance of Hispanic Serving Institutions that's led by Ann Gates. So UTEP won in 2019, and they noted two of their programs was the Affinity Research Group Model. And with the Affinity Research Group Model, which was developed by Ann Gates, you're looking at cooperative teams and looking at cooperative learning principles. And what she found too was that looking at cooperative learning and teaching students about cooperative learning really helped in terms of working on team projects. It's also working with research projects. So she found that to be beneficial. And actually the ARG is being used throughout CASI as well. Then they also had peer-led team learning, tailored more to their programs, where this was in terms of their introductory computer science course of having workshops associated with the course that was peer-led team learning. Then I just want to give the other two universities, and that's University of North Carolina, Charlotte, where they had identified a connected learner program. And that was to say, for a student, they connect students with their peers, but also with professionals in the community. And they wanted to move students to see themselves or identify as a computing professional. There's also the STARS program, which is really based on connecting students with community-based activities and community-based projects. And so UNC Charlotte has been involved with STARS for quite some time and found that to be very beneficial. Our inaugural award recipient was Georgia Tech, and they attribute their good retention having to do with threads, where students can tailor their program appropriately, where students select 2 out of 8 threads that they want to have for their programs, for their curriculum. And they felt that that gave the students more ownership in their curriculum and the classes that they were taking. Then there was also Georgia Computes and Rise Up, which is really more toward K through 12 and looking at AP classes, the computer science AP classes. But they felt that those contributed to the retention. So here, just a little bit about lessons learned with the University Award. It was about being intentional about the programs to retain diverse students. So we saw in the write-ups about the intentionality. Then it's interesting, while we had Howard and also UTEP utilize peer learning, but we saw also some differences, and that's where we're seeing differences to look at different institutional cultures. And then we found it's important to track progress and see trends in the data. And that requires that you disaggregate the data and not group data together so you can see what's going on with different cultures, also gender and the intersectionality. So in the last 5 minutes, I'm just going to talk about the Tapia Conferences. And so with the Tapia Conferences, this is where we started in 2001, where for the Tapia Conference, we have the goals of celebrating diversity in computing, having the ability to connect with others, obtain advice, because you have that community, and be inspired by the speakers. So we have a combination of invited speakers for the program, as well as receiving program content from the community through a call for participation. With that program content from the community, it's a combination of technical content as well as professional development content, meaning it can be content about going to grad school, also what happens first year in industry, looking at forming communities. It also includes birds of a feather session so that students can form communities also with professionals. So it's attended by students, undergrad and grads, also faculty, as well as professionals. It's about 60% students. And we see, for example, We have Hispanics in computing. They have a really large BOF, oftentimes at the Tapia conferences. So just to give a little bit of data too with Tapia, and I'm going back to 2019 when we were in person, because I think that part is important. With Tapia 2019, it was where 85% said attending Tapia increased their dedication to completing their degrees because they had an opportunity to see others who looked like them and are very successful in computing, have an opportunity to not just see them, talk with them. So we have speakers, we encourage them to stay around and talk with attendees. I can recall one attendee, and this was when John White was the executive director of ACM, and he asked, how do you become an executive director of a society? So, and that was really good. I had to stay and listen to that one. 97% said it provided an opportunity to make some new connections, and that becomes so important. And then it was also looking at being inspired to learning about various opportunities in computing. So those opportunities range from, going to grad school, going to industry, entrepreneurship, starting your own company, starting organizations. So it's really great in terms of that diversity of experience that the participants have at the Tapia conference. So when we look at the Tapia conference, in terms of lessons learned, we find the importance, and you're hearing this again, role models become so important. And I just have to share this. When I was going to graduate school and even undergrad, it wasn't until I started a faculty position at Northwestern that I realized I had never seen an African woman faculty member in front of me in a classroom. So I never had an African woman faculty member in any of my classes. So the first semester I'm teaching, a student came up, he goes, "You're my professor?" I'm going, "Yeah." He goes, "I've never had a Black woman professor." And I told him, "Neither have I. So at the end of the semester, you tell me what it's like, because I haven't either. And I'm really interested in your experience." So it was good, but role models become important. Then I think community of peers, having that community is so important because as things occur, the community provide a support structure such that the community can inspire you to continue, because we all have ups and downs, and having that community of peers becomes so important. And also the need for supportive environments. So we try to provide an environment where we're supportive of the activities of all the participants. So we have a doctoral consortium where PhD students present their research, and they have a panel in which they're getting feedback in a supportive way. We also have posters, and that's done in a supportive way as well. So I want to wrap up with increasing diversity, the lessons learned. And I just want to highlight a few lessons. One, institutional change, and it requires being aware of institutional culture and the need for internal advocates. So it's not where we're going and overlooking the advocates and go straight to the LEAP fellows. We always go through the advocates about interacting with the LEAP fellows, but we also provide opportunities for the LEAP fellows to form a community. And recognizing that while we want change tomorrow, it does take time. And we're still going through that change. And the importance of being intentional about programs. That is recognizing when you're developing programs, who are your target groups? Getting those groups engaged in terms of providing some initial feedback about the programs, but being intentional. And that is having measurable outcomes And that's so important so you can track the progress. And the importance to facilitate communities, to have, an inclusive environment, and also providing role models. And in some cases, the role models may be provided externally, but still providing those role models become really important. So with that, I'll say thank you, and I'm available for questions. And I can stop sharing, and that way it makes it a little better. Okay.
All right, do we have any questions? Zoe.
Thank you for that great talk. I'm wondering if you have any specific resources or best practices when considering these issues with regards to computer science for non-majors or computer science for all. Do you have any particular programs you'd recommend looking at?
Yeah, so with respect to computer science for non-majors, I think a number of programs are starting to have the CS plus X, which really gets at the non-majors, where you're combining it with another major. And that part is so good. One resource that I will point to is Bpc Net portal. And the Bpc Net portal is available for writing a Bpc plan. So with size, now with the proposals, you have to provide a Bpc plan, and the Bpc Net provides a number of programs that you can link into with respect to broadening participation. So with us, in terms of the programs that we have, even for non-majors, we see students coming to the Tapia Conference, and forming communities at the Tapia Conference becomes really good. So I know one time, I was talking to Dave Patterson, and he told me he noticed a difference in his class. He said, Valerie, I have to tell you, I noticed a difference in my class with the minority students that attended Tapia, because he attends Tapia, versus those who don't. And I was like, wow. And he was saying, they form a community, and that community gives them someone else to talk to as well. So.
Thank you.
Yes.
Elizabeth.
Thanks. Thank you, Valerie, for that lovely talk. That was wonderful. I am wondering what you think the best way to support first-year students is, or set of best ways. We have noticed a little bit of attrition, particularly with underrepresented students in that group. And I'm trying to figure out what, if we only have a small set of resources, where can we get the best bang for our buck in supporting these students and retaining them?
Right, and what we found is actually mentoring helps. And we found mentoring with juniors and seniors, because oftentimes, and it's just, you're right, with that first semester, it's becoming acclimated to the environment, and it becomes especially the case for first generation students. And the question that comes up is, you're struggling in the course. And if you're struggling on one exam, the first thought you have is, this is not for me. I need to get out because, see, I'm struggling with an exam. And the reality is, you're struggling with an exam, figure out what concepts you didn't understand, get the help, and then continue on. Because more than likely, everybody else struggled, but oftentimes you don't know that. You don't see that bigger picture. And other students can tell you, I struggled in that class too, but it gets better. And I think hearing from another student that it gets better, I learned when I was a senior associate dean, I would tell students, it gets better. And they would tell me, you tell everybody that. That's what you're supposed to say. you kind of go, no, no. And I was, I grabbed another student. So we actually set up a mentoring program to help. And that made a big difference. We also talked with parents. And that was to tell the parents, when your child calls you and is crying because they flunked an exam, tell them to go see the faculty member. So we had conversations with parents as well. And one of the faculty member, his son, was in engineering. And he told us, he said, my son called me up and said, do you think I should go talk to the faculty member? He goes, really? He goes, so you think so? He goes, how many times have I said? He goes, all right. He goes, I could tell. So we also talk to parents as well to, because it takes everyone involved, and that's talking with the parents as well as giving them some peers to talk with.
Thank you. That's great.
So how would you go about setting up a mentoring program?
So what we did, and we looked at a couple of things, because there are some mentoring programs that are out there, like I think MentorNet, that's out there that can work with universities. We looked at that as well. And when I was at Texas A&M, what we decided to do, and we worked with our Office of Assessment and also worked with others in education to say how to frame the questions such that we ask students, do you want to participate in the program? Do you want to be grouped? It's a way you have to ask the question about grouped by gender. Do you want to be in groups? Provide more information about your interests. And then we also ask the students as well to actually be mentors. And then you do some matching in terms of that. And sometimes we did it where student organizations wanted to be involved and do the mentoring with their, with their members. And then other times we did it as well. So we did it especially for the targeted groups.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else? Amr.
I think you're on mute, Amr. No, not yet.
Amr, you're muted. There we go.
Let's try. Can you try again? Let's see. Maybe is. Okay, we'll keep.
Amr, you could type your question into the chat. Amr, use the chat.
Probably going to get another setup in terms of the microphone. I think we've all done it. So.
Okay, well, maybe while Amr is, here he is.
Behruz has a question.
Yeah, Behruz has a question.
Yeah, thank you for a very interesting presentation. I'm writing a brief report on what you discussed, and unfortunately, I forgot the name of the first two programs. I got the University Awards, Tapia Conferences, but what were the first two?
It was the LEAP Alliance, LEAP, and also the Academic Careers Workshops. And they're all on
Thank you.
The Commanded website too.
Yeah, I'll search for these, but if you can put in chat the websites, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Definitely.
Would you like to try again? Maybe not.
I understand. There'll be more opportunities. We all understand.
Yeah.
Yes.
Anybody else? If you raise your hand, okay, Tevfik.
Thank you for a wonderful talk. I wanted to ask you about one thing with the, workplace. Of course, with the university, what we can do as a university is a factor, but especially in faculty recruiting, I think also the city you are living in, that also matters. Especially for the PhD student placement, do you see differences between different universities or different regions for that? Or, should the universities use different strategies? Do you see that being a factor, not just workplace, but beyond the workplace, what the environment is?
And that's a really good question. And I'll give you also experience at Texas A&M, which is in the happening town of College Station, okay? So I always had to use happening town of College Station because there wasn't much happening there, but you kind of go happening town of College Station. But with recruiting, as a faculty, we said, how can we stand out with recruiting? What is it that we have here that makes a difference? And we went to looking at, we have a winery there, and we said, maybe we can have a dinner at the winery. We said, when we're doing the faculty recruiting, let's make certain if it's a woman, we have a dinner just with women, and we put that on the schedule. Dinner with women or dinner with African Americans. And we found that made a difference. And we would ask, do you want a dinner with other African American faculty across the university? Because it tells them that you care about them as an individual. And that makes a difference. And we said also, I would make certain when I was a department head that I had dinner. I had breakfast. Nobody else wanted the early morning, and I'm an early riser. So I had the breakfast, and it was a wonderful time that I would talk about the numbers in the department, such that they knew it wasn't a numbers issue, but they knew we cared about that too. So, it's really about being intentional, and you can do well. When I was at Texas A&M, we had 2 Black women faculty in computer science, and that was in the happening town of College Station. It makes a difference. I went there too, and when they had my schedule and they said, we're giving you a dinner and reception with Black faculty and staff at the university. And I was like, oh my God, you have that written out on the schedule. And they go, is that not what you want? I was like, yeah, but you have it written out on the schedule. And they go, you don't want it? I was like, no, I was just surprised. So, that's the part I think that really makes a difference. And I think getting to know people, targeting people as they are grad students, as you see them at conferences, establishing that connection at a conference. And you can invite someone, to maybe come to your institution over the summer as a way to get to know the institution. Because Santa Barbara is a beautiful area. Beautiful. So we had College Station. So
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, you want to try
I think
now?
can you hear me now?
We can.
Yes.
Okay, good. So I was piggybacking on the whole issue of retention. That's when I was before these last questions. And how you were focusing on the top 10 universities, which are probably not very diverse.
Right.
And as a result, as an environment, it's a very difficult environment for minority students, for Black students, etc. So my question actually kind of relates to HBCUs and their role and their potential role, not only as a feeding institute, but also for producing a professoriate kind of faculty and helping in this process. This is part of my question. The other part was, there was a recent article in the Washington Post, I don't know if you must have read it, which was
Right.
talking about how the experiment with Google and the industry seems to have failed, or didn't succeed, at least succeed with Google. So these are two different things. They are kind of related, and I want to understand the role of HBCUs and how we can leverage them, or how they can be leveraged better.
Right. Okay. So
Especially in light of this article, which I'd read yesterday.
right. So it's really good. So I want to start first about LEAP and focusing on the top producers. And the issue that comes up is that it's a myth that these top institutions are not good for minorities. And I'll say it's a myth because it's a myth that just perpetuates. No, you shouldn't go to MIT. No, you shouldn't go to Berkeley. And I went to Berkeley, and Berkeley, Berkeley, I enjoyed my time at Berkeley, and they were very encouraging. The faculty, it was a really good environment. And so that's part of what LEAP is looking at, dispelling those myths about going. And we're seeing increases. And also what we're seeing with LEAP, you're right. When they saw all of their zeros, there became this strong commitment because they knew the numbers were low, but you think 1, 2, okay, But when you see a whole bunch of zeros, you just go, oh my God. And so it's this commitment, and it was a commitment to looking at how are you doing recruiting? How are you doing admissions? What's the oversight? Because if a student doesn't come from what's perceived as a good university, who's arguing and advocating for that student? And that's where the advocates come in. So the advocates are bringing students forward to faculty. Then as you have successes, it's a snowball effect. Well, what about more students from that institution? I didn't look at that institution, but wow, it's really great. So part of it is that exposure, creating that environment, having that oversight. And what we do with the LEAP Fellows is to say that advocate serves as your point of contact with issues, but also the community we're here. HBCUs serve an important function, I think, for minority students. And that's HBCUs, Hispanic serving institutions, tribal colleges is really important for undergraduate, graduate programs. We're having some discussions now to say, okay, we focused on the institutions where everybody gets their faculty to help with diversity. What about if we focus on also institutions that graduate a number of PhDs, to talk about going into academic careers and also preparing for academic careers? How do you prepare for an academic career? And so, we're having some discussions now about doing a different cohort, because we said the LEAP Alliance, they have a common goal and they've created the community. Maybe we actually do another cohort that have common goals that are addressing different issues. So we've been having those discussions about having those common goals and different cohorts. And we said having a cohort of about 10 to 11 institutions is about right. We don't want a cohort of 20 institutions. Some don't show up, others don't. 11 is a good number, 10 to 11. So that is a good point. And we said there, you know, industry is coming to recruit heavily. And, you know, what about also academia coming to recruit? So we are, that's a really good point. And it's an important aspect too. Mhm. Yeah. And we've
William.
also been connecting the LEAP Alliance also with HBCUs and HSIs, also with recruiting.
Any thoughts on the Washington Post article?
Yes. Okay. So because it's interesting, you know, Howard just received the award, the retention award, and they noted that as helping with retention. The issue that comes up in that article was about the hiring process, you know, and so it, you know, so I felt like it wasn't presenting the whole picture, right? And that is, what did the Google engineers do in terms of the impact of the curriculum? Are the students more competitive? Why is the focus solely on Google? Where did the students go in general? You know, what's been the retention? So you felt like a bit, and I understand because Google was there, and you know, that's a question for Google in terms of their hiring. But what's been the, you know, what's been the overall impact of the students and what they're doing and where they're going? Are they going to other industries? How many job offers are they getting? So it's so many other metrics that I just felt like, okay, this is a case where it wasn't providing the full picture. But you know, and
hold on. Do we still have time for this session, or I mean, I'm wondering about the schedule here.
I think it's okay. This is Chandra. I have just more questions for her anyway, so we can continue on, or I can take over, whatever you prefer, Linda.
I'm fine with this. William's had his hand up for quite a while, so William.
Thank you. Thank you, Valerie. Great talk. I really enjoyed your perspectives. So Tapia just asked a question about, faculty recruitment. I have a question about graduate student recruitment, right? So what was your experience in, recruiting graduate students or PhD students with underrepresented minority? Because my experience is that it's hard because all of the universities, they want to hire. So what can you do, right, to actually make your department and make your group stand out, right, and actually in attracting this PhD students with diverse background?
Right, and here's a couple of things. I think one thing we talked about too, even with the LEAP Alliance, but I think in general, and that is research experiences for undergraduates. Those are really so important because the student gets a chance to get to know the university, especially when they're in person. And the university, the faculty, you get to know the student. However, I want to point out the REU is 10 weeks, and it becomes so important to make certain that that student has a good experience. And that is having a project that's defined for the student when they come in, doing the check-in with the student, making certain the student is feeling a part of the group. Because oftentimes we bring a student in and we may meet with the student once a week. But that's such little time to meet with a student 1 hour a week. Is that student also engaged with your grad students? So when I have REU students, I meet like twice a week. My PhD students, I was like, okay, everybody's meeting every day. And so the student is just like, can you, I need some time. I go, oh, okay, but I want you to know that we value you as part of this group. And so a student may start off, I may not know much. I go, that's okay. This is a learning process, but you have much to contribute. By the end, everybody's excited. And that's what you want. So I would say that the REU is so good, but also here's another connection. And that is collaborations with faculty at other institutions. Because, oftentimes, so for example, the student comes for your REU, you can also, maybe go to that department and give a talk and talk about your research and talk about the institution. So as you give talks, and this is one thing we did, as you give talks at conferences, I would ask the question, is there a minority serving institution local that you can go to visit and give a talk there? And I was just like, it serves two purposes. It allows you to have an invited talk. And I was like, as department head, I would tell people, I'm happy to make a connection and call a friend to invite you for an invited talk. Because as a new faculty, you kind of go, well, how does invited talks work? You call up your friend and they invite you. You don't wait, you're proactive. So you can make connections with institutions as well. And you want students to have a good experience, because when they have a good experience, they'll go back and tell their friends. If they don't have a good experience, they'll go back and tell their friends. And I think it being proactive and being intentional. So for example, now with the LEAP Alliance, we've had discussions, we prepare materials as a LEAP Alliance. When somebody goes to a conference, ACES or SHIP or another conference, they're taking materials as a LEAP Alliance, and they're advertising about all the institutions in the LEAP Alliance and leveraging from each other. Then what we do too is when students from our targeted groups have been accepted, we also set up a Facebook page, so that way they can know about each other and say, okay, if you go, I'll go, and then I'm not by myself. Or, okay, I see you going to Stanford, I'm going to Berkeley, we can stay in contact. So when they're admitted with LEAP, we also set up a private Facebook page so that the students can get to know each other.
That is a great idea.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Mm-hmm.
Valerie, I was wondering about community building. It's such a strong recurring theme and throughout your great talk. And you talked about building community by helping students go to, let's say, Tapia and other events like that. But do you have some best practices or suggestions on just things that we could do within our department and university to help build community? I find it's hard to get critical mass, and there's all these things that are going on and students are very busy. But how do we get those communities to be built without it becoming diluted or lack participation?
Right, and that is oftentimes you're reaching out to the students to ask those questions. And that, you're looking at, for example, to start off looking at where you have student organizations. How are the student organizations doing? And it may be working with the student organizations that may be floundering, how to work with them so that they're stronger. What resources do they need? And then, oftentimes, to get valuable feedback, when we're in person, food works well. It works well for faculty, it works well for students. And that is having some food at a meeting, and start off with the food, instead of this wait until the end, I just go, we're just eating and you talk and eat. And get some valuable feedback. And people, the students were honest. We did that sometimes. It was like, okay, how can we help? And we learned from that, and students were saying, I'm active in this organization. I really don't have time for much more. And so then we said, okay, how can we make this organization stronger? and provide you with some materials. You know, what do your, you know, what does your membership need? Can we provide you with some, you know, peer tutors with this organization?
That's tremendous. That's really helpful. Great suggestions. The other thing I was wondering about is you've had just an amazing career. You've done all kinds of different things in terms of being in academia and now at the national labs, and you've done all this outreach, but also have just had an incredible research career. I was wondering for our grad students who are here on the call, on the Zoom, sort of, can you just kind of talk about those different options and in terms of career choices for research, for PhD students, and even for master's students, industry versus academia, and what your experience has been?
I'm happy to discuss that. Great question. I think, you know, it's interesting when I was finishing the PhD, I wanted to go into industry. You know, my advisor came from industry and then went into academia. And I told him, I said, you know, he goes, so what do you plan to do? I said, I'm going into industry, and then I'll consider academia. He's like, no, you need to go in academia. Really? So he was saying, we need you in academia. And so I was all slumped over. He goes, what's wrong? I was like, you just put the weight of the world on my shoulders. And and it's too much. And so, and it was funny because he went out and advocated for me and had interviews in academia. And I told him, you know, so we came to an agreement. I'll interview in academia and also in industry, okay? So that's what I did. And it sounds good. It was a lot of travel, but it was good. Once you do a good, you get a good, you know, career talk, you can, you know, be on the road. And, but I began to realize in academia, the questions were different. So in academia, it was like, where do you see, you know, research in the next 5 years? Or what is it that you want to work on? What about funding? I was like, oh, in industry, you know, it was to say, you know, oh, we have this ongoing effort, and this will be a nice complement to what we're doing. And what they were doing was exciting. But then I began to realize, I was like, oh, academia, you know, I didn't know that I could chart my own path in academia, you know, because as a grad student, you're focused on the research, you know, and your advisor is getting the funding, and you don't quite see how that process works in some cases. And so I decided to go into academia. However, the people that I interviewed with in industry, we became collaborators. And then I began to learn too and value that it was not a conflict of interest to collaborate with different companies. And I was like, oh, this is even better. You know, then I got connected with the national lab. And so, you know, the national lab, the resources and the facilities is just great. So then I changed my teaching to be Tuesdays and Thursdays so I could be at Argonne Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I was like, oh, you know, and at Argonne, everybody's working on research full time. So you just walk around and talk about research. I was like, oh, this is just great. So it was taking the opportunity to learn about different pathways and being open to different pathways, and taking the opportunity to interview in academia and industry instead of making a choice as to where you interview, and to do both. So I had collaborations too with Rich Walsky where we were on the grid, the Global Grid Forum. And
yes, for many years, actually. Boy, absolutely. Hi, Valerie. Yes,
Hi.
no, I've been here. I just, you know, I've been enjoying your talk. So, yeah.
Yes, and see, yeah, and I still remember, yeah, with the Network Weather Service.
Yeah, that's it.
See, yeah.
Many years.
Yeah, and you get to collaborate with, you know, different people, and you value that. and working with grad students. So but I will say this too, you know, in grad school, you begin to learn what you like and what you don't like, and that's fine. And so I think things evolve over time. And I would, you know, at Northwestern, when I was there, for example, I was going to give a talk at Texas A&M, a research talk. And then a person called me and said, can you interview for the department head position? You know, and I was thinking, I like causing problems, not fixing them. Come on. So, you know, I like being in the faculty meeting going, no, yeah. And I go, now, you know, it changes. And you know, I had to stop and learn about the department. So I'm just like, I just can't come and go, oh, I want to interview for a department head. So it took some months to prepare and decide. And then once I learned about the department, I told them, I said, I think this is the best kept secret here in terms of the research that they were doing and the work. And so it was a good fit. And then, you know, I was coming to Argonne to give a talk and they said, you know, the MCS director position is becoming available. I go, oh, okay. They go, so are you ready? I said, you know, I had my talk, I'm good. Are you ready to become a director? It's like, but then you think about it and you go, it's time to interview. And it worked out well. So I'm really enjoying it here. I do miss, you know, the teaching. So, but you can have, like I have a research faculty appointment with University of Chicago. And so I think, you know, it's making certain to have the time for teaching. So.
Wow, that's incredible. If other people have questions, feel free to raise your hand. I'd be happy to have you guys ask more, but I have another one if you're okay with it, Valerie.
I am.
You know, it has to do with leadership and sort of, you've led lots of things. And I think a lot of young people aspire, you know, you are super inspirational, want to be able to lead things. And those kind of the story you just told was, you know, these opportunities came and you thought about it and deeply and then pursued them. But I mean, that's a lot of work. You have to figure out how you're going to lead others. Can you talk a bit about that experience from your perspective? And
sure. And it's an evolving process. And let me see, I'm still recovering in terms of the bandages from the, no, but you learn, like, it's a learning process. And I found that you can be a leader in terms of, you know, as a grad student, in terms of having a voice and seeing issues and moving in that direction. So, but it does become a learning process. And even though you read about different leadership theory and, you know, different leadership strategies, when you put things into practice, the culture becomes so important. So I give you an example. When I first went to Texas A&M as a department head, you know, at Northwestern, you know, I was in a meeting, you voice your view, you know, no, I don't think we should do that. Yes, I do. And what about this? So, you know, so you're voicing your opinion in a collegial way. And when I got to Texas A&M as department head, I was still voicing my opinion. You know, I thought, okay, I'm one of the faculty too. And I was saying, you know, I think this is really good. And then the discussion would stop. And I was just like, well, what do you all think? They go, well, you've decided. I go, no, I'm voicing my opinion. I want to hear what everybody else said. They go, no, you're the department head. So, you know, that means it's so. I was like, but no. So then I had to realize, I go, oh, you know, now as a department head, I have to voice my opinion to myself, which was hard. You know, so you then become a good listener, you know, and so people that knew me, they were like, Valerie, you don't have anything you want to add? No, I'm listening. So they go, no, I'm listening. Here, I can repeat what I've heard, but I'm listening. And so I became an active listener and understood, what does that mean? And then, but it was from making mistakes. And I then took, at Texas A&M, I took a class about mediation training, or, you know, looking at conflicts. And the thing I learned there is conflict is really about emotions. It's not about fact and logic. It's about emotions, and it's how a person was made to feel because of an action. When you get to the heart of it, is how did that make you feel? So I you know, over time, I learned these skills to go, okay, the conflict is really about how did that make you feel? And understanding that. So it's where you evolve over time, and you make mistakes. And so I still make mistakes, but I try to reflect and learn from the mistakes. And I can't say I won't make the mistakes again, but I'll try not to. But, you know, it's not to say it's not from trying, but you try and give it your really intentional effort. And even when I got to Argonne, I took a leadership. It was like I was enrolled in a leadership program that was really good too. Mm-hmm.
That's really good. Thank you. Deba, are you here? Did you have a question? I keep seeing your hand up. I don't know if you're coming.
The talking of feelings came, and first of all, thank you so much for that wonderful talk. I enjoyed it so much. So I was wondering, like, can you speak a little bit to the experience of, say, that one Black student who is in our classes, and what do they feel?
Oh, I can tell you that.
Thank you. Please tell us.
Okay. Because in my grad classes, I was the one Black student. And I can tell you, you have a feeling of isolation, because, and especially what you start off dealing with is also people's perceptions. You know, when they don't know you, you start off with people's perceptions. And especially in classes, it comes up in classes where you have to work as a group. And when the instructor says, and you're the only in the class, the one thing you don't want to hear is the instructor to say, okay, everybody form a group. And you just go. And you just look around. And then, you know, somebody will look over there and see they're by themselves and you're by yourself. And they go, you want to form a group? Thank you. It's so much better when the faculty member says, take the person sitting next to you and form a group. Or I'm going to call out numbers. Everybody with a 1 connect with a 2, or something like that. But when you're the only and you're asked to form a group for a project, and you get, you know, and I've had this experience where, you know, on a project and someone says, you just write up the material. Really? You know, and so, you know, and I've learned to have, you know, to value my voice. I was like, no, I'm not doing that. So no. And you know, so that's not what I'm doing. We don't have to work together, but I'm not just here to do this. No, I can contribute much more, so we can split this and do this. But so you begin to learn to have a voice, but when you're starting off and you're the only, it's very hard. And you feel like, too, if you don't do well in the course, it's even worse. Because now, who is it that you go to, you know, to study and say you're not doing well? Unless you have friends. And so I remember, what was it, at Berkeley, when I started in spring, which was the off semester. And Manuel Blum, I went to him about something, and he said, you know what, you need some friends. And I was like, well, I'm a new student. So he stood out next to the copier. He goes, hey, she needs some friends. You come over here and be her friend. You know, you kind of go, I don't think that works. He go, yeah, it will. What's your name again? She needs a friend. Okay, go ahead. Uh-huh. And you just go, okay. You know, I know, you know, it was good faith and he was trying, but you need, you know, in a class where you're by yourself, that community, it becomes on the instructor to help with that community. And I took a class and what was it? It was Randy Katz's class, and he helped with my project. And that is, I was with another member, you know, in the class, and every time we would go talk to Randy, this person would just try to out talk, and you kind of go, okay, go ahead. And so Randy called, you know, I had a meeting with Randy, and he said, I just want you to know, I totally understand, okay? I see what's going on, and I totally understand that when we had a take-home final, and he said, I want you to work as individuals, I was like, hooray. And he wrote on my paper, I am so glad you did not use the concepts that were conveyed during your group meetings. Thank you. So it's to say you do have it, but I think that's where reaching out to the student to see what's needed and what's going on just goes a long way. And finding, you know, and asking that student too about communities that may go beyond the department. So for example, many universities have a Black Graduate Student Association that goes across the university. Making certain that student is a part of that organization, you know, if they so desire, and finding other avenues that they can also connect. Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much, Valerie. I actually have a follow-up question to that. I mean, you spoke to the experience of the student in a class. I mean, for context, we have a program that sort of initiates our undergraduates into research. Could you speak a little bit about what are some mentoring strategies we could use in terms of speaking to that isolation or doing better with undergraduate research for underrepresented students?
Oh, okay. So I want to say that Ann Gates, the Affinity Research Group model is really great, because what it does is looking at cooperative learning. And in cooperative learning, you're giving everyone a role. It's a clearly defined role, because oftentimes in cooperation, the roles are not clearly defined and it causes confusion. But in a cooperative learning model that she has, you're giving everybody a clearly defined role, and then you're rotating that role, okay, among the students. So, you know, because the role is clearly defined and it's rotating, it's not where someone is the take charge and I'm going for the A, I'm not going to let you do anything, because if you do anything, you'll get us a B. You know, it's the cooperative learning. And that model, because it's rotating, everybody gets an opportunity to actually serve in different roles. It also helps self-esteem, because it's explicit about getting that opportunity in a role and doesn't leave it to be ad hoc. Mm-hmm. And I can't say enough about the ARG. So it's a foundational principle with CASI. Ann holds a workshop at the Academic Careers Workshop, and what she does with the Affinity Research Group model. But I would really advocate for that when you're talking about working as a research group. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah, Right. And I think too, having that experience of rotating roles, it gives everybody a chance to experience the dynamics of different roles. Mhm.
And I think that would also have worked really well with our capstone groups. A lot of us have led those teams, and I think that would just help everyone kind of come into their own, participate more. But I just wanted to thank you again. We're going to have to stop it here because there's this is the end of our fireside chat. And I just want to thank you again for your time and your effort and your insights and all the things that you've done. It's really helpful to us. We really want to make a difference, and we're really trying to chart a course towards enhancing our diversity, equity, and inclusivity here at UCSB. And this has been truly valuable. So thank you. Thank you again. And let's all thank Valerie.
Thank you.